Is this a hush-hush topic, or do people talk about it openly? Now, I will present to you three scenarios, which is pretty much three sections of our Indian society. Okay. So, the first section are those where the children and their parents are completely cut off from the Bharatiya perspective. Okay. So, in such a scenario, it is very natural for you to think that anything that is the cultural practice is a taboo, is a superstition, because you and your influencers talk that, you assume that there is nothing of sense in anything that is cultural. So you will think not going to the temple during the period is a taboo. You will think not touching the tulsi plant is actually a restriction. It is a means of suppressing women. So this is a very natural perspective that comes in because your means of education has only been the Western perspective. Okay. Now there is a second section of society where the parents have been brought up with the traditional values. So the parents follow these things, they want to do it, but their children go to English speaking Western education systems. So then what happens? In school, the teachers tell the children, all this is superstition, but they go back home and their mothers and their grandmothers are telling them, don't do this, this is our culture. So then there will be a rift between the parent and the child. And children will start to think that my parents are backward. They do all these things because, it's just culture. There's no meaning to it. And then there will be a divide. Then there is the third category, the third section, where fortunately the parents have no influence of the Western system and they have only learned from the culture. These are mostly the women you think of as backward. These will be those who are daily wage workers, farm laborers, women who are living in the rural areas. And their children will be studying in government schools, where even though the teachers are and the education system is largely what the British left us, still there is some understanding of the culture. Now, in these three sections, let us talk about openness in talking of menstruation. Okay. The first section of society that I told you about, where everyone blindly dismisses anything that has anything to do with culture. So here we assume that we talk very openly. But what is our understanding of menstruation? It is something that is there for childbirth. So when I talk to older boys or men from this section of society, for them menstruation means knowing that the girl is not pregnant. So that's an indication. In some ways, that is the method of safe sex. And when we start to talk to boys about menstruation, that is the only association they will make. Whether you call this openness or not, we will leave for another day, but this is how it is. Now, the second section, where there is half understanding and half dismissal, there most often the boys don't know much about menstruation and they only find out much later in their life, perhaps after marriage, and they're confused because their mothers said follow the tradition, their wives are too modern and saying no, that's nonsense. Okay, so they don't know whether to talk about it or not. So it's again half here and there. And finally, the third section, the rural people. Here, especially in South India, when the girl gets the first period, this boy was part of the celebration. No one gave him menstrual education, okay? He was just invited to the function because the whole village was invited. The men in the village were invited to the function. Then in this boy's home, when his mother or his sister got the period, very naturally, he had to help with the cooking and the cleaning and the household chores. Okay, very naturally he understood, okay, my mother has a period today, she has to take rest. Or my mother cannot cook sambar today, he will go to the neighbor auntie's house and say, auntie, give me some sambar, my mother has her period. He is not consciously trying to be open about it. It is very naturally in his ecosystem that menstruation is but a natural part and parcel of life. Very naturally, he thinks that when my mother or my sister menstruates, they deserve to take rest and I will help in the cooking and the cleaning. Now, is that the open-mindedness that we want to reach, or is it just this biological understanding of menstruation related to sexuality and childbirth? So this understanding is something we all need to ponder about. When we say we need to talk about menstruation, who is not talking about it? And if someone does need to talk, what should they talk about it? If we remove the cultural context where the men had an active role to play when women in their lives menstruated, what will we reduce it to? Is that a healthy reduction? Is that what we want? These are things we need to ponder about.